Ganuza. Feeling a claustrophobia of tiny things, I think, architectures of the open. I put my hand out into air and find nothing, which isn't it. Wrong move. It's not nothing. It's quite wild. Zzz! An opening appears. Blue jewels of plankton sparkle transparent on your skin. Bulbous eyes and spiky noses. The whale comes to eat them. And in you go. Now we're talking and hollering to hear the echo. Jonah, not expecting an answer, but his head pops up from the muck, electric blue and happy to have someone to talk to. He says, the world is so full of a number of things, ambergris and indigestion, and us among them, squeezed suddenly out into the wide blue sea. I feel like shit, he says. We swim to the island, and you see how easily we do that. But we needed the coconuts and the crabs to open them. It is easy once you get the knack. The real trick is to notice where the wind blows, or the ice, or fire. One foot hovers above the next step. Stop motion. Barefoot? Shod for pavement? The landscapes whiz by like windows in a roulette wheel. Which will it be? Click, 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 click. It's Bangalore? No, I get to choose, and I don't know anything about Bangalore. Spin again. I smell roses. It's Hyde Park, and my friends are there. Nick and Henrietta, and all the others, too. The feeling of belonging, and the kindness of strangers. The world opens out. The people are happy. The day is warm in my eternal London. Space. Sure, okay, Charles. I know it. As spaces, where all things are, sap, roots and branches, flowers, vines, deep upheaving magma and searing ash. Vast animals breathing, stars, planets, temples, all the architectures of words. Those prodigious builders of architectures without an architect, making the spaces they make as they make them, and the things. But then what doesn't? What keeps you locked in one? Here's where Mrs. Tiggywinkle comes in, apparently. It's what you do in poetry, let things come. Even serious poetry? I do not think there is any unserious poetry. Not at my age. She comes in with her little wet nose and gentle whiskers that tickle your hands and face, and all those spines. It must be the spines, that's why she came, a little ball of spines. She came with that space, a tiny, private room. She's breathing quietly into her dark, damp, pink little belly. Eyes closed, comfortably warm, protected inside her spiky self. Let's uncurl her. Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of a hat. Open this door. A cave and flickering flame and smoke. Antlered man and running deer, massive bison and slashing cats, big ones you do not want to meet in any dark alley, your back against a wall. Now your panic footsteps echo down the pavement, overhung with fire escapes and glittering in the midnight rain. In a movie, we see the killer from above, racing down the alley, then pan to Lexington Avenue and fly above the taxis. Everybody blows their horns. The sirens come from everywhere, hurtling downtown, and the gargoyles on the Chrysler Building cover their ears and gaze longingly over at King Kong, who at least can jump down if he wants to and get bagels and lox, really big ones, or go to McSorley's for a couple beers. My God, I love this city. Explorers Club. It's important to explore pretty much all the time, otherwise you get stuck. I do anyway. The original sin is monotony, from which comes boredom. The others all come from these. It's nice the way things are set up so that monotones don't last. Meek! Or maybe the sound of a huge tuning fork, the big C dying very slowly away, like a train leaving with your honey, please don't go, or a foghorn, which is not monotonous at all, but very nostalgic, and punctuated here and there with various simplest motions, or the color red, for instance, has bright and dark places in it and little lights, or yellow, especially yellow does too. And then there are shapes, too. They're so various. Circles, say, or rectangles. Think of all the rectangles there are, or triangles. Yes, especially triangles. Or the stupid dodecahedrons we had to make in 9th grade that pissed off my best friend Dave so much he squashed his on the teacher's desk and is still mad about it 45 years later. And though our regular solids were a monotonous manila color, you can have shapes in many other various colors too. And then, wham, we have Kandinsky's spiritual paintings, which are not monotonous, thank you, Vasily, but in fact they make me a little nervous and remind me of when I was very young and I would get a high fever and the world would go crazy inside and outside me, and everything would sort of vibrate as if there were some screams trying to come out, and frantic, terrified colors, too, which was not very spiritual of everything at all. So I don't like Kandinsky. I mean, not personally, because I didn't know him. He was probably a nice enough man. Like our math teacher, probably, too, though he was kind of an asshole. But I guess he meant well. And anyway, high school was sort of boring. We would watch the clock tick, 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 and the second hand goes around in that circular, jerky way they used to do, the time stretching out in bleak and endless frozen tundras without any herds of musk oxen standing in stalwart circles, their gorgeous curved horns, defending against the snarling wolves who have run out of lemmings, who all ran off the edges of the glaciers, calving vast blue blocks of ice into the Arctic seas, surging and cresting wildly while the vicious wind rips the tops off them before they have time to make their perfect shapes like sine waves, rippling and snaking towards the barren shores, where the scattered remnants of once glorious and heroic bands of explorers cling to life, eating moss and the splendid speckled eggs they scoop from rude nests of stone hidden in plain sight on the rocky, windswept ground. The foolish, sad-eyed birds are doomed. Tropical fantasy. I'm feeling a little sad this morning, but I've learned that this is not very important. Because as long as you get up and have a nice big cup of coffee and do your exercises like you always do, and then have some warm oatmeal, which has to be steel-cut oats, trust me on this, with some fruit, like pale banana slices with the tiny black specks that must be the seeds, I think, and dark blueberries with the little hole in the top where the flower, I guess, was, then you will be okay. Except for some of the achy parts that you have when you get old. They don't mostly warn you about that. I don't know why. Maybe they did and I just didn't pay attention. Unless, of course, you're clinically depressed, in which case the fruit doesn't help very much and you will not be okay after your exercises. And I don't really want to talk about that very much. But I think that in either case, you should definitely write something because it can make your life better. Because even thinking about those little black specks has me wondering how one of them could end up as a banana palm 50 feet high under some sunny sky, and it seems entirely marvelous, which is nice. Because also what they don't tell you is that sometime after you are born, you will eventually die, hopefully not too soon, maybe by being hit by an ice cream truck while crossing the street to get some beer, or a plane might fall on you. Or you could die in a fiery crash any time. Or you will get some awful lingering disease that nobody understands. And in any case, there's a good chance you'll be in pain and or lose your mind eventually. And I don't know why, but it makes me happy to tell you about seeds and death while I'm watching the gray squirrels raid the compost in the snow and seeing that they really like pineapple pieces, the rind and the core. And I wonder if they are tropical squirrels visiting in winter and they have come from Central America like the hummingbirds. But then they're less enthusiastic about the banana peels, so maybe not. I don't know about that for sure either. Lemonade. How things are depends. In fact, I find it hard to understand how anything actually is at all in the face of such instability. Such as a lemon. This lemon, which I have in my refrigerator in the kitchen. It is cut in half, or quartered maybe. I think we used some of it last week. I was just in there a while ago poking around, and I remember that I saw it behind the ginger root, refracted by facets of glass like a Brock still life. It still is there, I hope, because I will need it for the avocado, which will be ripe the day after tomorrow. Maybe. And I have no special emotional attachment to this particular lemon, cut neatly through the sun-kissed stamp, though I do worry that it might get moldy by the time the avocado is ripe. So I am examining my memory of it closely, and I see the rind is starting to dry out, which is a bad sign, and there are too many seeds, which is annoying when you squeeze it on your avocado, and I'm sure that you can taste some of the juice, and it is making your mouth water and dribble down your chin, so that you recall an orchard in Florida or California, and your attachment to lemons is stronger than mine. The dusty rows, the heat and harsh sun, the smell of sweat, the Mexicans and their dark sunburned skins, the huge slatted boxes of lemons, and ancient rusty trucks idling along the road where an anxious bearded hitchhiker holds his sign, New Orleans. And children are running wild, ejected like seeds from the pod of the lazy yellow bus, while the lemon half cries out in his confinement and wriggles to the edge of the shelf. Let me out! The grapefruit and the oranges rush en masse and hurl themselves against the door in the dark and cold, and spring it open, and he is free, and drops upon the floor, face down, sobbing with relief, until, with sudden shock, he understands his mistake. High above, on the sunny counter, the avocado peers down at the aborted escape. We read no emotion in his silent, stony face. Falconry. I look at my old poems, and there's always a hawk plunging. I mean, sometimes literally. Well, in the poem, I mean. There's a hawk plunging. And if not in the poem, like literally, then I mean there is some motion which is like a hawk plunging, or I'm looking for motion like that. So what was that? It's something that always dead-ended in the air, that hawk plunging down from that empty blue sky, zoom, whoosh. Talons first? Beak? Beak, I think, with wings folded as fast as it is possible to plunge silently and in some other world, like the cross in the cool church vault. That's a lot of potential energy being released, changed to kinetic, downward, racing, perfect motion. How did he get that high in the first place? Work. It was work that got him up there, which will be mostly converted into heat and something very bad when he hits the sweet and dreamy-eyed rabbit, or whatever he will hit. Unless, of course, we hitch him to some gears or belts and pulleys and maybe turn a generator, or a mill, and grind exceeding fine. Or better yet, I see a carnival ride with small children laughing in blue and green and yellow striped bullet things, orbiting freely in the planetary spaces above the heads of their older brothers and sisters and their parents, and the midgets and the magicians of the midway. Put the goddamn bird to work doing something useful, and for the love of God, have some bloody fun. Laws of motion. I wonder why sometimes people can't think of what to write about, or even get bored. When in this world, or any world at all, I would think, if you just give anything a little nudge, you'll find it perched in unstable equilibrium, just barely long enough to notice it. Aperture flashes, open, shutter snaps, and then off it goes and disappears. Heraclitus liked this. Parmenides was frightened, and so are lots of us. Muybridge had his phenicistoscope to stop the trot and prove it backwards. So take that horse then running down and dissolving backwards, walking gracefully into the golden sands of Arabia, grazing the infinite steppes of Asia and the windy grasslands of America, shrinking at last to Eohippus and disappearing into the name of some absolutely precise and unknown, strange and odd-toed ungulate, and so on into the continuously flowing flesh of deeper and deeper time. We take steps and snapshots, a fossil, an image, a name, crawling back into that great body suspended from a web of ladders made of ropes and vines and roots, stretching from rim to rim of the cosmic crater that makes us giddy and frightened by the fall. So we come armed with music and paint. We chant, make pictures on the walls, make things, make words. I, for instance, hold the hoof which keeps intruding, insistent. Watch me, it says, watch me, and you should never ignore the call of that wild. This horny hoof and the cosmos whirling around it, zooming, glittering, unfocused lights. I see its rough, dark surface, this hypertrophied fingernail. It wants a shoe. I bend and raise that massive, gentle foot, hoping not to be kicked unconscious across the stall where this great beast breathes, stabled by the ranks of curious gods, arching over us, together, breathing cold air, steam rising from our nostrils, the hammer, the square nails, the heavy dark iron of the shoes glowing red from the anvil, and the searing terror of the fire in this furnace of the Valkyries, where so many heroes have gone to fight and gloriously to die. The air is screaming crimson, the heaving flanks, the four hooves now shod, assembled, stamping metallic fury. Things are getting out of control. I hear Wagner trumpeting in the distance, and suddenly the page turns, and we are all a snappy Technicolor cartoon coming from some other universe. This random response to terror is less dangerous than Parmenides, and more natural, just as cosmic, even spiritual, though my enlightenment mind is wary of any force that heaves that hurtling train off the rails and sends it into air, just like in Green Eggs and Ham, free from the gravity of Wagner's horns and the inevitable, evolving catastrophes ahead. But mustn't we go there, following the destined folds of time and space? We have not learned the shock and freedom of the edges of chaos. Punch out that wall, bam, baby, and watch the waving grid lines churning and roiling and breaking out ahead, making Descartes motion sick and Lobachevsky cry. But it's hard for the horse to get her footing, and I ride her like a cowboy hearing happy Copeland sounds while the Valkyries are upended and bounce away, their helmets spinning and glittering like stars in the infirm firmament. It is not that the gods have gone, but they do not arch over us in any sky, no Zeus, no Yahweh, no separation of the heavens and the earth, no primordial, dark, destroying sea. We are all in the permanently eddying flood, all of us. There is no us and them, no sinners to be destroyed, no ark, no prison. I am the horse, and she is me, hermaphrodite, centaur, god and angel and devil, and holy Jesus, the imagination. Homage to the Captain. When I was a kid, I read every science fiction and fantasy book I could lay my hands on. For about 10 years running, I used to buy them at the A&P, where they had them on 5-foot spinning circular racks, and my mother would let me buy 3 or 4 every time we went shopping. They were 50 or 75 cents, or eventually $1 or so, and I devoured them. Aldous, Anderson, Anthony, Asimov, Ballard, Blish, Botha, Bradbury, Clark, Clement, DeCamp, Delaney, Dick, Dish, Ellison, Farmer, Heinlein, Herbert, Knight, Cornbluth, Le Guin, Lieber, Lewis, Lovecraft, McCaffrey, Miller, Moorcock, Niven, Norton, Pohl, Silverberg, Simak, Smith, Spinrad, Stapleton, Sturgeon, Tolkien, Van Vogt, Vonnegut, Wyndham, Rogers, Lasney, and more. The stuff we read in school left me completely dead. Middlemarch? Jane Austen? Seriously? Well, Hamlet was pretty cool, and Macbeth. But still, nothing like Clifford D. Simak's Strangers in the Universe, 1956, with the very unsettling surrealist kind of painting on the cover coming to me out of another world, where eerie Twilight Zone sorts of things happened, and the atmospheres were filled with the bizarre and frightening, the unexpected everywhere, and the very strange feelings that it gave me, which were really very like the feelings that I had naturally all the time, not feeling much like I belonged in this world except for the spooky hidden things that lie in wait everywhere that nobody I actually knew talked about or even apparently saw. And nothing at all like Miss Havisham and Pip, though eventually I did read all of Dickens because he is in tune with it, actually, in a way. But that was later when I'd lost touch a little with the strange universe we really live in, and that Duchamp and especially de Chirico were on about, or Hugo Ball. Even, and eventually, I liked Dolly for a while, or tried to, but it always felt a bit wrong because he's just another literalist, so Miro actually makes better spaces. And I didn't memorize any of the weird Wordsworth we were assigned, but I can still recite the old farted play, most of it, an orange claw hammer, and I'm writing 3 poems at once right now, and you won't know which unless I tell you which I won't. So I'm really bummed by the fact that I took Heidegger, oh no, not him, seriously, when he said that every great thinker, and how incredibly pompous is that, thinks only one idea, which is pretty Parmenidean of him in spite of himself. I mean, okay, it's good to be able to focus and even maybe to know almost everything about something like pemmican. Maybe, though, I kind of doubt that. I should have gone with Johnny on his Harley up to Woodstock that weekend, instead of staying to run the vegetable stand, where I watched the old ladies, the cherries, and the celery inexorably fading and wilting in that wretched summer sun. Quilatoa Loop. I met a guy on the rim of a crater in the Andes. He said, "In your country, everybody is racing into the future. Here, everybody faces the past. In 1 hour, I have to get the oil changed, and then I've got to talk to someone on the phone, which I do not like to do. And tonight, I need to fix the cold frame. I have 3 essays to write, though I don't exactly have to. They do seem impending. And this poem is pressuring me right now. I think about retiring and how poor we will be and what will happen if I get really sick and we have run out of firewood too soon this year. It will be cold in the house tonight, and how will I cut enough for next year? I have lots of caffeine in me. I like that. It's an antidepressant, but it makes my heart race. I hear somebody else's idiot music through the walls, which makes me edgy and angry at them, and I think about what I would say if I really let off steam. So I'm playing Philip Glass from Candyman. I used to think about death all the time, zooming towards it. Not so much now. My space is bigger. I'm not being squeezed at high speed through a narrow tube to be flushed into Terminal Bay, raw and untreated. What animal is that? What beast? Dragon? Sure. Leviathan? Yeah, okay. But I'm bored by all that mythic business. We know what dragons are, and if you don't know Leviathan, then immediately you go look it up, and so you're slotted in and done, and that's bullshit. I mean, it's true, but I'm not interested in truth. It's a dead end. I'd rather learn to pay attention, though that may be way too hard, really. But I'm betting it's worth trying. One truth says that the scatological ejection is eschatological, that the beast is time, and history is root 666, and we've been waiting to get to the end since 4004 BC. Personally, I think some Christologies are rather helpful. I often use several simultaneously, both when I'm a Christian and when I'm not. The crucifixion is particularly handy when you're clinically depressed. Then if you wait a very long time and are very lucky or graced, you will be given mercy and a kind of resurrection. And that will be deeper than any truth. And it isn't a myth either, because it isn't a dead end. And it isn't a beginning. It's just that the world shifts and you go on, only better, and very slowly. And what you learned? I'm not sure, but if you started teaching it, it would all go horribly wrong, like it always has done. Maybe you could try to give mercy and resurrections, at least some kindnesses now and then, without making a big deal out of it. But don't be too good at it, or people will notice, and then you will become a saint, and you will have followers who will maybe do some good, but who will eventually all climb inside a dragon, and we know where that ends. No. You need to pay attention now. Not at the end. Not when you are better. Not even later today. Not even in an hour. That's all future stuff. It's what we do here in our countries. On the edge of the volcano, they face the past. They face it now. Holy shit, my face is exploding in colored lights. My fingers are dropping onto the table with muffled thuds and squirming like worms. I'm not kidding. See what I mean? If I'd been worried about the oil change, this would not have happened. Try it sometime. You're welcome. Flight mechanics. A dragonfly, exactly the color of a dusky blueberry. Libellulidae, but I forget the genus and species. The mechanism of the thorax is one of my favorite things, a wonder of the world. All the dozens of muscles have been given names, though no one asked the owners. The biggest ones make the spiky wings pivot on the fulcrum underneath. The tiny ones convert the angles of attack. So precise, so delicate, so strong, so superbly acrobatic. There is nothing we can make that even comes close. Zap, he swoops and grabs a horny, bouncing midge right out of the air, too fast for anyone to see. And now, zoop down into silty loam that sucks us in like water with a whoosh. and we're tunneling along behind a giant earthworm, trailing slime behind a pink and urgent thrusting glide. Dim phosphorescence lights the halls, and crowds of pale and eyeless beggars hug the walls. Something about their noses fascinates me. 1,000 urgent dwarves from a demonic Disneyland, arrayed along the dripping walls in a lineup straight from hell. The noses all large, all ugly, all dirty, all different, all the major feature of a face. Noses of the homeless and destitute in a lewd and gritty comic. It's dark and damp and warm, and a huge heartbeat grabs our attention. Thump, the thump, the thump. The camera pans slowly left towards a light down the tunnel, and the dolly rolls along the tracks with superb cinematography. We gradually discern a figure in the mist, Marcus Aurelius astride a bronze enormous horse burning fabulous with a smokeless golden flame. A crowd of white-robed women shuffles in the hall. Slow fade to black. The sound of someone running. Footsteps, gasping breath. Fade to blue sky, fills the screen. Clouds whip by in heavy wind. Giant anthropomorphic cacti punctuate the sky like crucified prophets in a Roman killing field. Bands of starving dogs wander ravenous around, following humming flesh flies that dominate the soundtrack as the breathing man slows down. We don't want to see the corpses with their eyes pulled out by crows. We zoom into a flesh fly buzzing near the ground, sarcophagus, pale-faced ancient Grecian mask of death seeking places for her families of blind and famished maggots. And here, in the higher diptera, we find a very different thoracic mechanics, less 19th century industrial, more technologically advanced, founded on elasticities of stressed chitin, the snap, the click, the bounce of resilient protein pads. But now in this final scene, the blotched gray, muted grandeur of her arched and pulsing back gathers infinite worlds around her, not merely beautiful, but sublime.